Well, without further ado, I'm going to let Mark come up. Mark Ehrich, come up and teach us tonight. Or stay down and teach us.
Yes. Yeah, I'm just going to stay down here. Let me start off by saying I'm a professional educator. Don't you try to teach like this at home. Okay. And that, I have faced teenagers on my whole professional life as a teacher. So you guys don't scare me at all, okay? But before we get underway, Pastor asked me to be sure to lead you all in the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you would please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You know, if you look at the last 6 words of the Pledge of Allegiance, with liberty and justice for all, that puts in a nutshell what it means to be an American. You know, that we value liberty, which is a special kind of freedom. It's a freedom that respects everybody else's freedoms and their rights. Okay? It's not license, because if you have a license, you can do whatever you want to do. Liberty is internally controlled. It's a self-government thing. Okay? And justice. Justice is absolutely, positively essential to any advanced civilization or even any primitive civilization. If you don't want people to start killing one another over a property line, okay, then justice is where you are entitled to what you have earned or what you accept as a free gift. You're entitled to it, okay? Now, notice I didn't say that you are entitled to what you deserve, okay? Deciding what you deserve or what you don't deserve is way above my pay grade, okay? The Almighty can decide what you deserve, but any court of law can establish, well, here's the contract, here's what he agreed to, here's what he's earned, here it is. Okay? So what you earn is yours. Okay? Or what you accept as a free gift, that's yours. Okay? And thank God that I have not had to earn my salvation. But I do accept it as a free gift. So this works for good or for bad. Justice means if you do good things and you earn a good reward, it's yours. Okay? If you do bad things, you have earned a bad reward and it's your baby. Okay? So that's liberty and that's justice for all. That means equality under the law. And that's the only kind of equality that you can expect. There has never yet been a society anywhere or a group of human beings where everybody was equal in their outcome. We're not born equal in our height, our weight, our intelligence, our sense of humor, and the differences get worse from there. Okay? So the idea that we're all going to have the same outcome, we're all going to live in the same houses, we're all going to have the same, no, that's a pipe dream. That is absolutely positively a pipe dream. That's never going to happen. But in America, we expect equality under the law, meaning this is a nation of laws and not of men. Okay? So, if I break the law, I have to answer. Okay? If I cause, now here's a justice thing, if I cause someone to suffer a loss that they have not earned, that's not justice. And so I have to pay something called restitution to return them to their original condition, at least. Okay? Which is a huge thought. Okay? That's a huge thought. And it's wonderful. So in America, we have liberty and justice for all. That's the ideal. Okay? In a nutshell. Now, Declaration of Independence goes into more detail. Remember, the Declaration of Independence is the mission statement for America. The Constitution is the bylaws. Okay? So the Declaration of Independence is about practice, and the Constitution is about institution. All right? And I'm telling you that, and well, I'll say more about that after a while. Okay, so I have to tell you right up front that America is an exceptional nation. And that we have, okay, a godly heritage that goes all the way back before the Pilgrims. Okay, we have a godly. Now, some of the stuff I'm going to tell you, you may have never heard before. You can blame your public education system for that, which was pretty much hijacked in the 1930s by the progressive movement. And John Dewey said, if you give me the education system in one generation, I can turn the hearts of a nation. And the educational system stopped being about education, and it started being about social change. It became an agent of social change, okay, which is terrible. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard of a rabbi named Daniel Lapin, L-A-P-I-N, okay? You need to do a search about Daniel Lapin. L-A-P-I-N, okay? He is not a Christian. He's an Orthodox Jew. But that guy is right on. And he doesn't call public schools schools. He calls them GICs. That's Government Indoctrination Camp. Which is, truth in advertising, that's pretty much what they are. Okay? So if what I describe for you sounds like revisionist history, no, this is history. And I would like to encourage you, if you don't believe me, go back to the original writings by the Founding Fathers. There are about 250 of them, okay, Founding Fathers. And don't read books about them. Read books that have their speeches and have their writings. And then it'll be right from their words, right out of their mouths. And you'll find out that these guys were giants among men. They truly were, okay? Just amazingly so. In public speaking, they tell us that you're supposed to start off with a joke. So let me tell you about John Quincy Adams. John Quincy Adams was, of course, the son of John Adams, who was the second president of the United States, okay? And so here's John Quincy Adams. At the age of 8, he is drilling with Minutemen with a real musket and live ammo. This is the military weapon of the day, okay? It was state of the art. And he's, at the age of 8, he's drilling with these guys with live ammo, okay? As a teenager, he went to university. Before he stopped being a teenager, he went with delegations overseas. He went to France, okay? He was an interpreter. He went to Russia. He was an interpreter and an attaché. This is an amazing guy. He spoke English. He spoke French. He spoke German. He spoke Italian. He spoke Russian. He spoke and read ancient Greek and Hebrew and Latin. He was elected to Congress. Then he was elected to the presidency, if I remember correctly. Okay. Then after he stopped being president, he was elected back to Congress again. And he stayed in Congress and died on the floor of Congress. What a statesman. What a guy. Now, compare that to AOC. Now, that's the joke. Well, I can hear the computers and TV sets clicking off. But that's okay. Because I love this country. I love our history. Now, as a Christian, I'm not permitted to be proud. Pride is a forbidden mental state. Okay? But if I was allowed to be proud, I would be so proud of our heritage and proud of our country and proud of our government. Okay? And so I'm going to kind of tempt you to sin tonight and maybe be a little bit proud also. Okay? So the history of this country goes back to, well, the Reformation. Okay? Remember, this is a Christian nation. There's no doubt about that. Anyone who does any sort of study in history, reads what George Washington said, reads what Thomas Jefferson said, okay? Any of the founding fathers. Well, okay, there was Thomas Paine. Thomas Paine was a thoroughgoing atheist, okay? Well, you can't, all right, fine. All right. And he wrote Common Sense, and he was very important, and I'm not taking anything away from him, but he was not a Christian. Okay. So, but just about everybody else, and a whole bunch of the delegates that signed the Declaration of Independence, they were ministers. They were thoroughgoing ministers. Okay. And during the Revolutionary War, there was a thing called the Black-Robed Regiment. The Black-Robed Regiment were all those clergy of all different denominations that were preaching the very stuff that wound up in the Declaration of Independence. Thomas Jefferson, that's two. Phil made me promise that I would mention Thomas Jefferson 5 times, so, all right. That's 2. That's 3? Okay, great. I'm ahead of schedule. Thomas Jefferson was tasked with, just one more time, with going home and coming up with a formal statement that would tell the entire world, we're going independent, we're breaking off our ties with, we're not going to be colonies anymore, we're going to be independent states, we're going to be a nation. Now, imagine if somebody came to you and said, you got 2 weeks to come up with a statement that will stand the test of time, that will be approved, and that will wind up in everybody's history books. All right, I don't think I could, well, actually now I think I could do it, because I could absolutely copy the real Declaration of Independence. Because remember, when you steal material from one person, it's called plagiarism. But when you steal material from many people, it's called research. There you go. All right. So the Declaration of Independence took him Thomas Jefferson, about 2 weeks to come up with. And you think, wow, he must have really gone home and hit the books and studied. No. This was a time cusp. Think of the Declaration of Independence as being the tip of the iceberg. A lifetime of preparation went into this. And everything in the Declaration of Independence had been taught from the pulpits of colonial America. Every one. Okay? There's even a story of a gentleman by the name of Muhlenberg, if I remember right, who preached this fiery sermon in his black robe. And then when he was done, I think, if I remember right, it was about, there's a time for war, there's a time for peace, there's a time for gathering stones, there's a time. And when he got to the end of it, he said, ripped open his black robe, and he had this uniform on underneath it of a colonial officer. And he raised a regiment of volunteers. So the idea that, this is church and we're supposed to be completely separated from, that's nonsense. That is absolute and utter swill. That's nonsense. All right. So I want you to cast your mind back to something with which all of you are very familiar, I'm sure, and that is the Geneva Bible. The Geneva Bible was one of the very first widely published versions of the Bible, and it was written, horror of horrors, in English. And worse than that, the margins of the Geneva Bible were crammed full of commentary. And it was commentary from people that were very, very important to the Reformation. So this was Protestant propaganda. Oh, it was so awful. Okay. Imagine that you have never read the Word of God before. Now, that's hard. We are so overexposed to the Bible that it is just trite. Okay? It has lost its impact for us. Okay? Imagine, if you would, that someone that you're able to save up money, because they were very expensive, and buy a Geneva Bible. And now you have a pocket Bible, which was, about this big. I guess they had big pockets back then. Okay? Well, compared to the pulpit Bibles were huge. And they were usually chained to the pulpit. Well, it wouldn't do you very much good to get to steal a pulpit Bible anyway, because they were probably written in Latin. And you go to church and you listen to the minister and he's speaking in Latin and you go, what did he say? They go, I don't know, but it sounds good. Amen. But now you have the Word of God, the Word of the Creator of the universe, His Word, His love letter to you in English with commentaries. And the result was, if I may use the term, revolutionary. There were groups of people that started reading the Bible and believing it. And they started saying, wait a minute, the church that we go to does a bunch of stuff, and we can't find it anywhere in here. And so here was one example, okay, of the difference between practice and institution. Now this is an age-old struggle. A movement will start out with practice, but then when you apply it to human beings, you've got to have rules, you've got to have regulations, you've got to have a dress code, you've got to do this, you've got to do this, you've got to pay your dues. And so it becomes an institution. Institutions grow in importance and complexity at the expense of practice. Now, as an educator, high school science teacher, okay, I loved the practice of education. Getting up in front of kids and talking to them, that was wonderful. And by the way, I could never go back to education now. I would be fired in the first week. I am way too opinionated. But remember, it's okay to be opinionated if you're right. Okay. I had a kid once that he said, Mr. Ehrich, do you think God really loves me? You think God really loves me? And I said, Bubby, God loves you so much, his shoes don't match. And I told him the story of the guy who painted the picture of the father of the prodigal son, who was running down the road to meet his son. And he had, on one foot he had a slipper, and on another foot he had a sandal. And I said, the guy who painted that picture wanted everybody to know that he loved his son so much. He didn't care what shoes he picked up. He just wanted to go out and meet him. And I said, Bubby, God loves you that much. Anyway, okay, so like I said, I got away with stuff. I have no idea how they protected me. You know, it's like, no, don't tell anybody what Mr. Ehrich said. I mean, golly, that's bad. I mean, okay. So here's the Geneva Bible, and they're reading it, and they're, practice and institution. You talk to a doctor. They love being a doctor, or they love being a nurse, but the institution of the hospital, you've got to have this dress code. You've got to show up at this time. You've got to clock in. You've got to do, you can't do this, and you've got to cross your I's and dot your T's. Anyway, you've got to do everything right, okay? And it's just suffocating. As an educator, I used to just hate all the meetings that we went to and this kind. Well, okay, I love the Catholic Church because they're Christians, duh. Okay, but during the Middle Ages, the institution of the church became much more important than the practice of Christianity. And so our ancestors began to read the Geneva Bible for themselves. And they're going, according to what the Word says, life should be a lot different than it is. Well, in England, the Anglican Church was the state church. And if you start preaching stuff against the Anglican Church and pointing out that they're wrong, they arrest you. In some cases, they put you to death. Not only arrest you, but you forfeit all your lands and all your property to the crown. So you have to imagine this early group of Christians, and sometimes they're called separatists, because they felt like, the government of England and the Church of England should be separated. And sometimes they're called, Puritans, meaning we need to purify the Church of England. But then there was this one group that, and this would make such a wonderful movie, okay, because they had to try to sell their estates, put everything in order, because they were going to flee the country. And there were times when, the women and the children are still on the land, the men are aboard the ship, the king's men arrest all the women and children, literally cart them off to a prison. The men have to sail away because the captain of the ship is like, they're going to seize my ship, so I'm going to leave now. I mean, talk about heroic, but these people were serious. They really believed, we need to do the right thing here. So they decided, okay, we're going to leave England. And we love England, okay? But we're going to go to Holland because Holland is very, very tolerant. Maybe a little too tolerant. Okay, but so they go to Holland and they settle in Leiden. Okay, and they're, they tell the Dutch government, we're not going to be a tax burden. We're going to pay our own bills. We're going to take care of our own elderly. We're going to be model citizens. And of course, in Holland, it's like, great, you guys would be, welcome. Well, as it turned out, the early church here was in danger of being assimilated into this very tolerant Dutch society. And so they decided, we thought this was the thing to do, but we're going to have to do something even more radical. And it's like, well, what are we going to do? Go to America? And it's like, yeah. It says, you're crazy. We could easily die if we do that. But their thinking was, we're going to sell everything. We're going to charter a ship, and we're going to buy a ship. So they chartered the Mayflower, which was a converted wine ship. It had never made the Atlantic crossing. Okay. They had a ship that they bought called the Speedwell. And the plan was, well, the Mayflower and the Speedwell will take us all to the New World. The Mayflower can go back to England. We'll keep the Speedwell, and we'll use it as a fishing vessel. What a wonderful plan. That's great. Unfortunately, the crew of the Speedwell intentionally installed a mast that was too big. It sprung some of the planking on the Speedwell, and the crew said, oh, the ship is not seaworthy. It'll never make the crossing. And so the Pilgrims, which they were called Pilgrims because they were on a journey, okay, they said, okay, well, we'll have to sell the Speedwell at about half what they paid for it. You're thinking, well, they should have done. They felt like if we don't leave now, this window of opportunity may close, and we may never get away from England. We may all rot in prison, literally. Okay, so they decided, all right, we're going to go. We're going to have 102 passengers, and then the crew on the Mayflower. Okay, this converted wine ship. And there were about 28 of them were actual pilgrims. So it wasn't, and when you think about this passage across the Atlantic Ocean, somehow we get the picture of all these well-dressed and well-fed, and everybody's happy, and the sun is shining, and the seagulls are flying around, and some girl is, in the front, going, like that. But let me tell you about the passage. They didn't leave until late in the fall. It was the worst possible time to try to go across the Atlantic. The passage is supposed to take 3 weeks, 21 days. They were at sea for 66 days during storms. It was cold. It was overcast. There were times when the captain had to lower the sails and just let the wind blow the Mayflower wherever it was going to go. Now, their accommodations aboard the Mayflower, these 102 passengers had the deck just below the main deck. Okay? The headspace was about 4.5 feet. What? That means from the deck to the deck where you could hit your head was about 4.5 feet, which is about that tall, which is a wonderful space to store wine casks, not so much for passengers. You have to, and there were so many of them, each of these pilgrims had the floor space about equivalent to a double bed. Now you have to imagine, all right, imagine being a woman and going along for 66 days, seasick, hungry, no bath, and having to go to the bathroom in a bucket. That was the passage across the Atlantic. 66 days. Several times the captain said, it's not too late to turn around. We can go back. Okay? But they said, no, we're going on. Okay? So by the time they make landfall, they're way off course. I just want you to try to imagine this, okay? You're thinking, I didn't ever learn about this in school. Hello? Okay. They were heroic. I mean, the women were more manly than I am. So they make landfall. They're way off course. They're supposed to hook up with the Virginia colony. Okay? Now, you have to know that we're looking about 1603. That's when the Jamestown colony started. Okay? About 1603. 144 men. No women and no children. It is a miracle of God. It is a miracle of God that colony did not completely go to rack and ruin and be lost forever, because there were no women to tell the men what to do. It was just all men. It was a completely commercial venture. Okay. Now at Plymouth, it was different. We had men, we had women, we had children. We have these 28 pilgrims, and the rest of the 102 people, they're adventurers, they're strangers, okay? And before they make landfall, they make a very important decision, and that is, we have to have law and order. So they draw up the Mayflower Compact. Now, this ought to tell you something about Americans. The Mayflower Compact was, it specifically said, this is for the glory of God. We want to bring the gospel to all the Americas. We're going to start from scratch. And we're going to do it right this time. We're going to have a society and a government and a culture and values as close to the early Christian church as we can possibly make. That's what they wanted to do. The Mayflower Compact changed the order of authority for the first time in history. All through history, the order of authority had been God, the king, and then the people. The Mayflower Compact said, no, all authority is God's. And then he gives authority to the people and gives them rights. And then the people choose a government. That was huge. And that's just the beginning. That's the Mayflower Compact. Okay, so they make landfall, and it's wintertime. There's snow on the ground. Worst possible time to get there. So they all checked into a Motel 6 and lived happily ever after. No, it was woods. And a lot of these people had never chopped down a tree. They had never planted a seed. They were townspeople. After the first winter, half of them were dead. Most of the women were dead. At the end of the day, they would ferry the women and the children back out to the Mayflower, and the women would shield the children with their own bodies to keep them warm. Most of the women died. Most of the children lived. It got so bad, and half of the crew of the Mayflower died that winter because they stayed there in the harbor. It's like, we won't leave you guys. Please come back to England. It's not too late to go back. And they said, if we die, we die. Okay? But we're not going back to England. This is our chance, and we're going to do it. So at one point, there were only 7 or 8 men that were not so sick that they were confined to bed. They could walk around. Everybody else was literally at death's door. Okay, so at the end of the first winter, half of them die. At the end of the second winter, half of the half is dead. These people were all in. They were absolutely all in. Okay, so they make a go of it. The colonies begin to prosper. Trade increases. More people come over. Waves and waves of different denominations come over and set up different areas in the colonies. Okay? And then a strange thing happens. In about 100 years, oh, by the way, the Pilgrims landed in 1620, the beginning of the winter, 1620. And so in about 100 years, somebody really smart said that, how did they say it? That virtue had produced prosperity as a child, and the child ate its own mother. Now you have to think about that. Things start going good, you start prospering, and you start looking away from your source. So, about the 1730s or so we jumped ahead about 100 years. The first Great Awakening starts. And one of the key people in the first Great Awakening was an Englishman by the name of George Whitefield. George Whitefield, what a guy. Okay. He made, if I remember right, 7 complete trips from England to the colonies and back. And then to the colonies and back. 7 times. He was not a big, robust guy. His health was fragile. His dream was to unite all of the 13 colonies under Christ. Before he died, and he literally preached himself to death, before he died, it has been estimated that 80% of the people in the 13 colonies heard him speak personally. Their radios were not working at that time. Okay? So this guy was an orator. Benjamin Franklin became a close friend of his. And Benjamin Franklin was listening to him preach, and he started paces off the distance from where George Whitefield was speaking until he couldn't understand the words anymore. And he estimated, this guy could preach to 30,000 people at a time. And it was common for him to preach to 20,000 people at a time. And you know who hated him? The established church. Because in the last 100 years, okay, the institution of the church had become so entrenched again. Here's Whitefield that says, God loves you. He loves you with a love that will never die. And he sent his own son to die for you. And they wouldn't let him preach in the churches. So he would preach in the open fields. And people would throw tomatoes, and they would urinate on this, climb up in a tree so that they could pee on him, which is, throw really bad things at him, and they would hire a drummer to come out and drum while George Whitefield was preaching to break up. But he would talk to the drummer and say, I know that your heart is good. Just win over the guy. He just stopped drumming and say, I need salvation. So Whitefield would get so sick, he would be at death's door. And his followers, his friends would say, well, he's going to die this time. And then in about 4 or 5 days or a week, his strength would come back to him, and he would say, praise God, I feel like riding 20 miles in the rain and preaching the gospel again. And that's what he did. He just rode up and down and then died. Okay? Now, the Great Awakening that went from about 1730 to about 1770, okay, that is what plowed the ground for the American Revolution. And like I said, it really made a difference. Now, George Whitefield wasn't the only one, but there was a revival that went through the colonies like no one has seen on earth before, and maybe not since. Okay? You could, where you used to walk down, downtown, and you would see prostitutes, and you would hear drunkenness, and you would hear people singing hymns and going to church. The colonists became worthy of freedom. Okay? And I'm telling you, the Black Robe Regiment absolutely told them, the Bible says that you need to be free. And the Bible tells you that there are 3 offices of Jesus. And this used to be an elementary school question. What are the 3 offices of Jesus? And give scriptures to illustrate all 3 of those offices. Feel free to raise your hand if you know those 3 offices. This was an elementary school question. The 3 offices are, and when I say this, you're going to go, well, wait a minute, that sounds familiar. God is our judge. God is our lawgiver. And God is our king. So we need a legislature to make the laws. And we need a Supreme Court to interpret the laws and settle disputes as judge. And we need an executive to act as a king. Wow. You think, well, no, they didn't get those ideas from the Bible. Yes, they did. The idea of private ownership of property. Show me one place in the Bible where everybody holds all their property in common and everybody works, No, it doesn't happen. It's like, okay, you're going to sit under your fig tree. You're going to sit underneath your vine. It's, the idea of paying a tithe, okay, that it's 10% of the increase of your property. Hello, it's your property. The idea of justice, the idea of equality, these came directly out of Scripture. They did a study. Sharon told me not to sit down, but I'm going to. They did a study, okay, to find out where did the ideas for the Constitution come from. And we know every word spoken by every delegate, it's all written down. Well, there were 3 sources that you would expect, okay, which you're probably ahead of me, but there was a French philosopher by the name of Montesquieu. There was an English judge by the name of Blackstone. And then there was an English philosopher by the name of Locke, John Locke. Okay? And they quoted these guys a lot. But you know what they quoted much more often? The Bible. They would find scriptures and say, well, in the Old Testament it said this is how you need to conduct yourself. This is what you need to do. Okay? They absolutely, positively were godly men. And not just a little bit godly. I mean, for crying out loud, Benjamin Franklin is sometimes talked about like, well, he wasn't very religious at all. He was the one, Benjamin Franklin, you know what he wanted for the seal of the United States? He wanted an image of Pharaoh's troops being drowned in the Red Sea and Moses standing on one side holding up a staff, and he wanted as a motto, resistance to tyrants is obedience to God. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, now that's Benjamin Franklin, who's not known. I mean, Benjamin Franklin is the one that said, beer is God's proof, or is proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy. All right. Well, yeah, I can see that. Okay. So Benjamin Franklin, they were at an impasse during the Constitutional Convention. Okay, and he was like 81 at the time. And he said, this is Erich's paraphrased version of what he said. Okay, he said, I've lived a long time, and I am convinced that God is concerned about the dealings of men. And if a sparrow cannot fall without his knowledge, a nation can hardly rise without his approval. And he says, I think we ought to pray. And everybody, it's like the old commercials about E.F. Hutton. When E.F. Hutton said, my broker is E.F. Hutton, and when he says, and everybody goes and listens, okay? Everybody got down on their knees and they prayed and and he says, I think we ought to start with prayer every session that we have. And that's what they did. Okay? You jump forward. I cannot tell you, men like George Washington, he was 6'4". Okay? The average colonist was, not even 6 feet tall. Imagine John Wayne in silk stockings and a white powdered wig. Okay? Imagine, well, Pilgrim, we gotta come up with a constitution. So here, thank you. I'm here all week. Try the veal. Okay, so here's George Washington. At the end of the Revolutionary War, he was absolutely, positively convinced that we would never have won the Revolutionary War without the direct intervention of God. And almost everybody, if you'd have gone to the average colonist, okay, at the conclusion of the Revolutionary War and said, do you think we did this on our own, or do you think God had something to do with this? They would have said almost universally, are you kidding? We're a bunch of guys with muskets. We went up against the greatest military machine in the history of the world and beat them. Not only did we beat English regulars, which were terrifying because they would march forward in a box into musket fire, and the first rank gets killed, the second rank comes right up behind them. And the second rank gets killed, and the third rank comes right up behind them. They were disciplined. And England hired Hessians, which were known worldwide for their brutality. Okay? So here, and they're guys with muskets. Now, okay, it's true that our Minutemen used their rifles just about every day, okay? And it's also true that they learned their fighting tactics from fighting Indians, Native Americans, okay? And so the British were completely unprepared for this. But I have to tell you something. The shot that was heard around the world that happened in the green at Lexington, okay? It was early in the morning, and there were about 70 militiamen with their muskets there, about 70 guys. There were 700 British regulars. That's 10 to 1. These guys were prepared to die. It's like, okay, let's count. We got 70 guys. They've got 700 guys. They're professional soldiers. We hunt squirrels on Sunday afternoon. It's like, so, okay, God is on our side. Do not fire first. This has got to be a defensive war in order to have the blessing of heaven. This has got to be a righteous war, and the Old Testament is full of righteous warfare. Okay? And so I think it was 17 or 18 of these Minutemen were killed on the spot. Okay? And the arms were destroyed, confiscated by the regulars. Okay? Then they went to Concord. And word was getting around to all these congregations that, you know, if you've got a rifle, you need to stand up. They killed 17 of us. And it's like, who do they think they are? Okay? So the road from Concord back to Boston, the British had to march in formation. And there were thousands of Americans that got together and started killing these guys. It was terrible for the British. It was terrible for them because these guys, these cowards, they're hiding behind trees. And they're hiding. They won't form up in a box and face us like men. And it's kind of like, well, no. But, you know, we're going to shoot you guys. Okay? All right. So after the war, and George Washington in his inaugural address, he made a point of saying, this, you need to be thankful. All you guys out there, you need to be thankful God has made this possible. I mean, for crying out loud, he's got to escape from the British. He's trapped on, Staten Island, or anyway, it's someplace in New York. And he's got to get across the river. And it's like, what are you going to do? Well, we got 5,000 guys, and we've got our artillery and our supplies. We're going to gather up every boat we can. And under the cover of darkness, we're going to have a group that's going to keep up the fires. So the British will think we're still here. And then we're going to get out of Dodge. Okay? Yeah. Okay? And so it's like you can't do that in one night. And Washington said, you watch us. Okay? And they did. They got every man, and did I mention as the sun was coming up, they still had people and they still had material to get across, but a fog rolled in. Who would have thought? A fog rolled in and concealed them. Okay? And so they get the last bit of equipment across, and the fog lifts. And the British look at all the campfires and the empty camp and go, we were going to wrap up this whole revolution in the morning, and they're not here anymore. This is the pattern. You have a wind that comes up that keeps the British ships from sailing up the river, and then it reverses and it's just one thing like that after another, after another, after another. Okay, the George Washington, before he was ever a general, was in a battle of the Fort Duquesne. He was working for the British. I mean, he was a loyal British subject, and he was an officer. And they were ambushed by the French and the Indian. Okay? And every officer in the group was either killed or wounded. Washington was the only officer that was still operational. He had 2 horses killed out from underneath him. After the battle, there were holes in his jacket. Later, after he had become president, one of the war chiefs that was at the battle says, I've traveled a long distance to see the great chief. He said, on that day, our rifles, our muskets could not but kill our enemies. And I told them, I said, see yon officer on that horse. You need to concentrate your fire on him. He's the only one left. And after a while, they kept missing him, and he stayed alive. And this war chief said, okay, quit shooting at him. He is protected by the Great Spirit. There's no doubt about it. Quit shooting at him. And he prophesied to Washington when he met him later. He said, "You are going to become the chief of a great nation. Millions of people not yet born will look up to you." I mean, this was amazing. I mean, just one thing after another like this. Okay? And once again, I'm thinking, ever hear this in school? Probably not. Okay, so we defeat the British. We start, electing presidents. We start, everything's going great. We ratify the Constitution. And I have to tell you something about the Declaration of Independence is a wonderful, if you want to read something that just thrills your heart and makes you, well, you're not supposed to be proud, sorry, but make you happy and rejoice at being a Christian and being an American, read the Declaration of Independence. It is inspiring. Okay? Yeah, I mean, it is just, I cannot say enough about the Declaration of Independence. And it points out, remember I told you, we are exceptional. We are endowed by our Creator. Oh, and the Declaration of Independence, which was co-authored by Thomas Jefferson. Is that 5? Okay. Okay. Well, I'm over quoting now. Mentions God 4 times. Okay. Mentions God 4 times. You go, oh, they can't do that. Separation of church and state. That is a bunch of bunk. That is a bunch of bunk. Okay? And it says, we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The original draft of it said life, liberty, and property, because they felt like you can't be happy without property. Okay? You worked for it. You're entitled to it. That's justice. I mean, come on. Okay. So life, liberty, and property, or life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's not an exhaustive list. It says among these are life, liberty. Okay. And these rights were not given to you by the crown. These rights were not given to you by some philosopher. They're not earned. You are born with these rights, and they cannot be taken away. You can't even give them away. You know it's illegal to sell yourself into slavery? Because your liberty is God-given, and even you cannot give it away. Your life, you cannot give it away. You cannot give somebody permission to kill you. It's a gift from God that you cannot even give it away. Okay? So these come from God. And that governments are instituted among men to protect these rights. When I went to college, maybe it's a good thing that I didn't know then what I know now. Because I had to take this class, and there was a professor, and the very first lesson he said, "What is the function of government?" And of course, we're freshmen, we're sitting around going, I don't know. What's the function of government? And he turned around and he says, well, I'll tell you what the function of government is. And he wrote it on the board. Government is supposed to supply goods and services to the people. Now think about that. He felt like government is supposed to supply goods and services to the people. No, it's not. Free enterprise, the free market supplies goods and services. Okay? You find out what somebody needs, and you fill that need, and they reward you with certificates of approval called dollar bills. Money is a sacred thing. It is. And you say, oh no, those wealthy people, they're finally giving back. We need to abolish that. I'm on a rabbit trail, but this is a good rabbit trail. We need to abolish that from our vocabulary. Because if a wealthy person is now giving back, what were they doing before now? Stealing? making money at somebody else's expense? No. No. In a free market, you have something that I need, I have something that you need. We barter back and forth, and when we go our separate ways, both of us are wealthier. Because we have both gained something that is more valuable and important to us than what we gave away. Okay. So, in a free market, the only way you can become wealthy is by helping people. And the more you help people, the more money you get. And in a free economy, the more money you get. You're not like Scrooge McDuck, where you've got this counting house and you've got this swimming pool full of gold coins, and you're doing the backstroke in these gold coins and you count them, like a mite. No. That would be a waste. You invest this. You make the world better for everybody. You make a factory to make more money. I mean, this is capitalism. You take your capital and you invest it. You take Bill Gates or these wealthy people, it's like, well, they don't need all that money. They're making all of America, all of the world better by investing this money, by plowing it back in. All right, got off the subject there, but so the government is not supposed to supply goods and services. We do that. Okay? So what is government supposed to do? The function of government is to protect the individual rights of its citizens. Period. You got rights, but if you don't protect them, there are going to be evil men. And our founding fathers understood. Men are born bad and they get worse from there, unless they find Jesus. And even then, it's an uphill struggle. But our founding fathers didn't, if you'd ask them, are people perfectible? Are people basically good, but they just grow up in a bad neighborhood and that's what turns them bad? No, our founding fathers would have said, no, they're born bad. They're fallen. They're the sin of Adam. They're bad. And you need to be protected from these bad people. You've got rights that they're not going to recognize. Okay? So, we're going to have a government, and the government is going to get to do something that you don't get to do, and that is use force to protect your rights. Think about this. The police force, the armed forces. Governments are about force, and they're really good at doing that. One of the few things that government is really good at doing, that's killing people. Well, the military, it's like I used to tell my kids, okay, if you join the military, you have to understand the function of the military is to kill people and destroy property, or threaten to do so. The police force, they carry guns. Okay, which is to say, you know, when a police officer, and I wish I could just talk to young people, you guys know what I'm about to tell you, and that is, when a police officer tells you to do something, do it. Because you're going to have to do it anyway. But a police officer's job is to turn a no person into a yes person. And he's going to use escalating force, if necessary, to do that. And if he winds up having to pull you out of that car and you eat a gravel sandwich, it would have been a lot easier if he would have said, would you please step out of the car? And you said, absolutely, I will step out of the car. And you go, officer, I think you're making a mistake, but I'm going to do whatever makes you feel comfortable. Because you want to go home to your family, I want to go home to my family. I'm going to keep my hands on the top of the wheel. I'm going to keep the map dome lit. I'm going to be respectful, and I'm going to do whatever you tell me to do. Absolutely, yes. As opposed to, what I do? What? All right, that's another story. Yes, I don't. Okay. So the Declaration of Independence is wonderful. Okay. And there are 27 specific gripes and complaints about King George III. He's done this, and he's done this, and he's done this, and he's done this, and so he's a tyrant. Do you know that in the original draft, there were not 27 complaints, but there were 28 complaints? The 28th complaint was, he has forced the colonies to maintain the institution of slavery. And the delegates thought, we really need the southern states to come on board with this. We need a United States. So let's not put too fine a point on that, and let's just plant the seeds of ultimate freedom by saying that everyone is endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Women? Yes. Slaves? Yes. Okay. But so anyway, from the very beginning, the seeds of the destruction of the slave trade was going on. I mean, it's okay. Because there's a movement today that would say, no, nothing that you're saying counts for anything because of the institution of slavery. And there's a very small minority of people, okay, that really hate the United States. And they are determined to separate you from the knowledge of your godly history like this, because I think it was Karl Marx that said, if you can separate a people from their history, they'll believe anything. Okay? So, just had a complete brain fart. So, oh yes, I love America, and I'm not permitted to be proud of America, but if I was, I would be proud of America. That's just all I'm going to say, okay? But there's a group of people that they hate America, they hate our history, they hate the Constitution. They're called progressives, okay? Which this movement started at the beginning of the 20th century, pretty much, okay? And the fruit of this is someone like a former president who will remain nameless, but who is a progressive, okay? And when he was elected, said, now we can begin the difficult work to fundamentally transform America. We're going to fundamentally transform America. Imagine on your wedding day, you turn to your blushing bride and you say, I love you, but after we get married, you're just going to have to fundamentally transform yourself in order to make me happy. He doesn't love her. He doesn't love her. So there are people that would like to point out the mistakes, and we have made mistakes in the United States, okay? But you don't keep kicking a dog for a mistake that they repented of 150 years ago. You don't keep kicking a dog for the same mistake that it's like, I get it, okay, I did the wrong thing, quit, okay, all right? Woodrow Wilson, I hate that guy. Woodrow Wilson, okay, about 1914, was a progressive, and he hated the Constitution. He was a globalist. He thought, a World Bank, that's a great idea. World monetary system, that's a tremendous idea. One world currency, that's tremendous. One world government, well, we can't do that all in one step, so let's have the League of Nations, where the United States is just one star in the constellation of all these nations on earth. No. He specifically said in some of his speeches that the Founding Fathers, they just got it wrong. They just got it wrong. The Constitution is completely outmoded. We have evolved. He actually said this. We have evolved to the point that now you can trust people in the government to do the right thing and to not harm you. What we need are bureaus. We need the best and the brightest minds in the world, and we need to appoint them, not elected, but we need to appoint them, and we need to make all these bureaus and all these subdivisions whose decisions have the power of law but have never been elected. Thank you very much, Woodrow Wilson. Okay. The more you learn about Woodrow, he was a very brilliant person. He was, the president of Princeton University? He was some Ivy League. He was a president. Okay? And when he was elected president, he was so smart that he just wasn't much good. Okay? And he was a globalist. So progressivism has just grown and gotten worse and worse and worse. Now you can call it what you want. You can call it humanism. You can call it progressivism. You can call it the left. You can call it socialism. You can call it communism. I mean, in the 1930s, you know how fashionable it was to be a communist in the United States? It's like, oh, they've got all the answers. This is wonderful. This is tremendous. There's only one little small problem with socialism and communism, and that is it has never come through with the promises that it has made to the people in the history of mankind. It has always produced suffering, blood, disappointment, and discontent, death. It's been estimated that communism is directly responsible for the deaths since it started in about 1914. The deaths of about 120 million people worldwide. Now, the left, all right, I just have a challenge for you guys. Look at the planks in the platform of the Republican Party. Now, look at the planks in the platform of the Democrat Party. The left has got to come down on the side that is opposite of what the Bible teaches. That's the only thing that causes that movement to make sense. That's the only thing that makes sense. The Bible says you should be able to put people to death for crimes. They say, no, you can't ever put people to death unless it's an unborn baby. Then if it's inconvenient, okay, that's fine. Yep, because that, that's women's health. That's, you look at every party plank, okay? The rich need to pay their fair share. We need a progressive tax that goes right through the ceiling. It's like, wait a minute, what does the Bible say about that? 10%. Just a straight 10%. You say, but that's not fair. Don't worry about how much money this other person has got. You worry about yourself. Okay? Don't look at them and go, they didn't earn all that money. They don't deserve all that money. God determines if they deserve it or not. They've earned it by making the world better. And they're plowing that money back into society. I think, Bill Gates and the internet and, the computers we've got, wow, this guy has really made our lives better, maybe. Yeah. Then again, on the other hand, anything that can be used for good can be used for evil. Okay? When you dig a hole in the ground, you can fill it with gold or you can fill it with sewage. So anything that has a great potential for good has an equal potential for bad. And I will say this. if you look at the things that hurt you the worst, it's probably the same thing that gave you the greatest joy at some time in your life. The well that you have dug with your emotions is now filled with either happiness or disappointment. I mean, that's, okay, no extra charge for that. Oh, all right, I have to wrap this up. America, we can regain what we have lost. But I need to explain something here in closing, my first closing. That is, let's say that you had somebody that showed up in the emergency room and they were really hungry and they were weak and they were confused and they're fallen down and they're dehydrated and they do a test and their blood sugar is really low and their electrolytes are all messed up and they're just in terrible shape. You could take each of those symptoms and attack it separately and say, well, we need to start an IV that's going to put water into his bloodstream. We need to give him salts that's going to balance his electrolytes. We need to put some glucose into his bloodstream that's going to raise his blood sugar level up. He's confused. His blood pressure is low, and we're going to attack each of these with a drug separately. Or you could feed him a meal. You could say, what this person really needs to do is eat and drink a glass of water. We can look today at poverty. We can look at hatred. We can look at our education system. We can look at our monetary system. We can look at all these individual symptoms, and we can attack each individual symptom. Or we can say, what people really need is Jesus. What America really needs is Jesus. The farther away we have gotten from Jesus, okay, we now are at a tipping point where there's a high enough percentage of people that do not follow Jesus, and they are pretty much ungovernable. Now, what percentage do you have to have before the whole nation becomes ungovernable? The founding fathers were absolutely clear about this. They said, you cannot have liberty without religion, and they meant Christianity. Okay? You cannot have liberty, you cannot have freedom without religion and morality. And you cannot have morality without true religion. And you cannot have true religion without the Bible. And the Bible doesn't do you any good if you can't read and write. It was a straight line, absolutely. All of the founding fathers would have said, absolutely, we need to teach people how to read and write so they can read the Bible, so that they can get true religion, so that they can govern themselves, so that they can live with all this freedom and not kill one another. It was a straight line. Their thinking was absolutely linear on this. Okay? At the time of the Revolutionary War, the colonies had a higher literacy rate than any nation in the world at any time in history. Because you've got to be able to read the Bible. And guess what they used in the schools to teach kids how to read? The Bible. And how long did they do this? Oh, only for about 150 years. This separation of church and state. All right, I'm going to tell you one more thing, and that's this. There was a Frenchman by the name of Alexis de Tocqueville. And Alexis de Tocqueville came to America in about the 1830s. And he wanted to find out, why is America so successful Now remember, the American Revolution was based on the principles of the Declaration of Independence. The French Revolution was a nightmare because they wanted equality. Okay? The only way that you can have equality, since you can't take the bottom and bring them up, you kill the top off. Okay? There's an old samurai saying from Japan, from feudal Japan, and that is, the head that sticks up above the others must be cut off. And that's the French, with the Reign of Terror, they wanted equality, and that's impossible. Equality under the law, yes, but equality of outcome, no. No, it's impossible. So Alexis de Tocqueville comes to America, and he goes to the entire nation, and he talks to people, and he finds out that government and religion and culture and values in America are seamless. And it has been argued that he didn't actually say this, but he could have said it, and he should have said it, okay? And that is, America is great because America is good. And if America ever ceases to be good, it will cease to be great. Thank you so much for what an honor that you would come and listen to me tonight. But if we can just wrap this up with prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for all your good gifts. Thank you for the seed that I may have planted here tonight. Thank you for all of your good gifts. Thank you for our government. Thank you for our Constitution. Thank you for the Declaration of Independence. Thank you for our godly heritage. Thank you that all is not lost. Thank you that we can come to you with a grateful heart, and like Joseph, who was sold into slavery by his brothers, okay, when he said that men have meant this for evil, but God has turned it to good. And you are able to do it again. And we thank you in advance. In Jesus' name, amen.